Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. As you can see in front of you, we are going to be reviewing the RMALTI 62MAS Homage. You guys are probably aware I unboxed these watches a fair few weeks ago, and now it's time to give you a full review on both these pieces. Now, why did I end up with two? Well, RMALTI were coming out with so many watches a few weeks ago, just a new watch literally every day. And once I purchased the first RMALTI, which is the one in my right hand, I saw a bracelet version and with the Birch Dial combination, so I thought, it's something definitely to, good to get in, so I can see it personally. And I really want to get to know RMALTI as a brand and just check for consistency first and foremost. So having two of the same watch really helps with that. Also, having the bracelet option is going to be really good for me and you guys watching to know which option to go for. So the question for today, and looking at these watches today, we want to identify how good the 62MAS Homage models are and if there really is a place for them on the AliExpress market, because as you guys know, there are numerous homages to this on AliExpress. So with these watches, as I already unboxed them, I covered the specifications and dimensions, so I won't be wasting time on that in this video. I'll put them up on screen for you guys. Just a couple of notes on the dimensions and specs. First one, the sapphire crystal. Now, the one on my left hand is the later version with the steel bracelet. That is confirmed to have sapphire crystal. I checked it myself with my, sapphire tool. And the one in my right hand, the non-bracelet version, the website doesn't specify anything. However, when I did check it against the sapphire tool, this come up as mineral glass. So that is something you guys want to take into account, because ultimately, you want the sapphire, gives you scratch resistance and a bit more of a premium material. Now, there is a price difference between both watches, but it's not crystal related. The price for the bracelet version is £142. And then with regards to the one with the strap is £130. I would suggest, if you do buy the one with the strap, that you clarify with RMALTI if it has sapphire or mineral, because I don't see why they have put two different crystals in there. I believe because this one came out first, they tried to save some cost and went with a mineral glass, but then when they made an upgraded version, I think they went with sapphire. And just 2 points on the dimensions, the case is actually a bit smaller than 38. It's 37.7 millimeters, but at the point of the bezel it is 38.5 mil. Now, also with the bracelet version, you do have the addition of male end links on the bracelet, therefore giving you just a slightly longer lug to lug from 47.7 millimeters to 53.2. Now, in terms of the watches and dial options, now I'm not going to go into dial options. You guys already know, if you've been on a RMALTI store, they are absolutely endless. So the links are within the description, so feel free to browse around on this site. You've got multiple dial options, and you've also got some nice accented bezel options that you can choose from. Now, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think if you have too many options, it does kind of spoil it slightly, because you just take that much longer to choose. But this is the newer version. They've got the birch edition with this birch texture on these dials, and that does look quite different. I think in hand so far, it's definitely a good option to consider. But if you want to go with something standard, a bit simple, they've got the green, greys, blues and blacks, and they've also got some special meteorite versions as well. But let's not choose the watch just on the dial. We need to check the watch out and make sure everything else is functional and of a really good grade. Now, with that being said, so let's first have a look at the quality of the dials. So with this first dial setup, you've got your traditional 62MAS style markers, very large and wide batons. Of course, legibility is king here. The markers are well applied, centered. They've got a polished frame on there. Pretty basic, and something which we see from all the other providers out there. Nothing really that different. You've got printed logo just below the 12 and some text above the 6. It is probably noteworthy that the text is of a slightly different font, just above the 6, where it's got automatic and divers. So there is a font discrepancy. It shouldn't be there, because it is better for continuity's sake to have both fonts the same. When it comes to the handset, they are relatively flat, fully polished, traditional baton hands, or traditional 62MAS style, should I say. You've got that rectangular pip, on the seconds hand, which is, of course, very recognizable as a 62MAS seconds hand. I don't see anything special with the handset though. It is a rather flat handset. Just for reference, I've seen much better finished handsets used on, watches from Heimdallr and San Martin. So let's move on to this, Birch Dial edition. Now, there's a lot more going on this dial. You've got, first and foremost, different style of hour markers. You've got slimmer batons, but you've also got a lot of, polished steel around them. When I put some light on there, you can see them a lot clearer. You've got fully polished hour markers, but towards the ends or the tips of those hour markers, you've got a chamfered edge, which slopes downwards and gives you some really nice flashes of light. I think when the light catches those hour markers, it really makes them stand out against that dial. Now the printing is exactly the same, the logo below the 12 and text above the 6. Now with this particular dial, they haven't gone with the automatic and diverse 200 meters. They've just stuck with automatic, giving you one style of text. I'd say visually it looks a bit cleaner and probably a bit better, than the previous version. Now you still got a printed minute track. However, the main thing about this dial is of course the texture. This is modeling itself after the Birch dials released by Seiko, and I gotta say they've done such an amazing job on them. I haven't seen a Birch dial in person from Seiko, but I can't imagine it's that far off. And on top of that, the detailing, the finishing on the hour markers is way above their price point. I think some of the best dial and hand setups on AliExpress. And this is, I think, the preferred option for me. There's a lot more going on with the dial. As I said, it's not as basic as the previous one. However, it's not as traditional as well. The handsets, again with this one, there's not that much brushing going on. The handsets are slightly chamfered. Gives you two different sides for the light to reflect on. Fully polished, a MM300 style handset. But you've got that rectangular pip on that second hand to give it that 62MAS likeness. Now let's go ahead and check out that loom. Now RMALTI seem to favor BGW9 application. It's present on all the models that I've looked at to date, and this one is no different. I think there's ample layering applied. There's no patchiness that I can see. It does glow pretty bright, really well application of that BGW9 on all the hour markers. Can't fault them. I think for the price point it's more than adequate. So now with regards to the bezel itself, you've got a coin edge style bezel. I believe these are 120 click unidirectional bezels. Both seem to have this brushed aluminium or steel bezel inserts. And I don't mind that option. I like moving away from ceramics sometimes. Sometimes it is good to see a different material, gives it a more of an authentic sort of feel to it. You've got white markers on there, standard markers, and the loom pip, which it has been nicely subset into that bezel. The coin edge bezel itself does have a polished lip, followed by all this grip, allowing you to really grab that bezel and rotate it. Now on that point, fortunately, we get to check for consistency across both bezels. So first and foremost, in terms of construction, is there play? Is there any bounce? Not that I can feel right away. The rotation is just the touch of springiness into it, but I feel they're using a clicking wire, and which is why you can feel some of that spring tension. There's no real playback, but it doesn't sound as premium. It does sound slightly hollow, so it does sound a bit tinny on the clicks, but it lines up, and it's not how I would like it, put it that way. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Now let's move on to the second one on this new Birch edition. So first and foremost, is there any play? Is there any movement, any bounce? No, that is consistent. Now let's have a listen to that rotation. Yeah, that's not a nice rotation at all. It's a very clicky sound, very tinny. I don't really like how that sounds. It seems, very poor quality. Again, that same tinny feel. Not backplay as such. There is a bit of movement in there, but if they have used that, spring wire, then it will cause that. But yeah, that's not a bezel I'll be really happy with. So it's not quite consistent, and that's just comparing two random models. So I do have concerns on the bezel. It could be much better. Now let's move on to the case, and what you'll see is the case is finished really well. That's something that does stand out in hand. You've got some really fine circular brushing present across the lugs. You've also got that beveled polished edge that goes along the whole profile of that case. You've also got drill lugs. You've got fine linear brushing on that case. So I like that. It's an upgrade over the basic 62MAS case shaping. The crown size is excellent, right? You've got the R logo on there. But the crown size is like 7.5 millimeters, so it gives you incredible grip. It's finished really well. You got the circular brushing in the center, and really good splines on there. So even with these gloves on, it's not awkward at all. It allows me to really grip that crown and just set the time as and when how I like. and the threading is not bad also. It works. Case back is plain, brushed, screw down case back. You know, I've got no issues with that. And I think the case shape, you know, is quite slim. It's a very lean case. There's no excess kind of body to it that you don't need. In fact, I think the biggest thing on here is probably the bezel, which makes it look slightly disproportionate, if I have to say. I think the width of the bezel is just too much. If that was a bit slimmer, again, you'd get that, you know, the old school 62MAS look. However, I get it. This is the own homage, and it also gives it a different look. If you look at some of the other color options and some of the accents, it really does suit the watch. It's like a beefed up bezel, giving the watch just a slightly different character. Now moving on to the strap. So yeah, this one comes with a strap option, and it's a weird texture, right? It feels somewhere between leather and silicone, but it definitely is silicone. You've got some texturing on that strap. You've got some stitching on there as well. Plenty of holes for adjustment, and the hardware on there is quite nicely done. The brushing across the top surface, that polished beveled edge, and brushing along the sides. So there's a lot of work on into, you know, just a buckle, and it's a very solid buckle indeed. So that's quite nice. And again, like, the texture's kind of strange to me. I'm not used to that texture of that strap, but it seems to be pretty well built. Now the bracelet, this is where I want to concentrate for me. Solid end links. The end links fit really well into the case. You know, I like how they've done that, and the bracelet is really well built. Full solid links. It's a 3-link style bracelet. You've also got screw-in links, so a premium feature on a bracelet, and the links are fully brushed along the sides, along the A face, and on the center links you've got that beveled polished edge, which gives it a really nice reflection, and it's present on both sides. So giving you a few facets on this bracelet to look at, and you've also got that polishing edge present along the top of the side of those links. So there's a lot of detail gone into this bracelet, a lot of workmanship gone into it. No doubt a lot of the cost would be also associated with the bracelet. It might just be one of the better 62MAS style bracelets out there. Now there is a touch bit of edginess, not as bad as some of the St. Martins I've seen, I'll be honest, but it could do with just a touch of refinement on the edge. But just worth mentioning, there is a slight edge. The clasp is RMALTI design. I already made my feelings clear about this. It should just say RMALTI, or just have the R logo on there that they've gone with on the crown. So that R in a circle in the center of the clasp would look great. It does liken it to the Pagani design quite a lot, but the clasp is really well finished. Similar design to a St. Martin, the brushing across the A face, and those beveled polished edges, brush sides. And as I said with this one, I think this one had a QC issue because you've only got 2 micro adjusts on a clasp this long. They are meant to have 4 micro adjusts on this clasp. So that's, you know, an error on their behalf. An error in manufacturing that wasn't picked up. It's come straight through to a customer, and, you know, albeit probably unhappy customer as well, because that's not something I'd want. You know, I'd definitely give it back for this just to get another clasp. But in terms of finishing and build quality, I'm very impressed with that bracelet. It is up there with some of the best. So on wrist, the first RMALTI that I've got, and this is with that rubber or silicone strap. The strap itself does feel nice. Like I said, it's got a very weird texture between like leather and silicone, but it does feel very soft. I like that buckle. That buckle really does stand out on this strap, and you can just see on the inside of the buckle how they kind of hold that strap in there. Perfectly made. Hell of a lot of detail for a buckle, I gotta say. It's a very nice one. Nicest buckle I've seen in a long time. But yeah, the strap, you know, they could do better. There could be better options, but you know, with this watch, everybody knows you can put anything on there: leather, rubber, you know, silicone, whatever you want. You can go wild with this strap, and of course with all the dial color options that RMALTI give, you know, there is endless possibilities. But the watch case, it fits okay. I'd say rather flat though, because if you notice on some of the C-sterns, you know, they have curved the lugs, but the 62MAS case is a very straight case. This is where I think, for me anyway, that 50mm lug to lug on some of the Heimdaller and St. Martin versions, you know, the 40 or 41mm diameter versions, don't really sit right on the wrist. My wrist is 6.5 inches in size, whereas the lug to lug is quite compact, but it does sit quite straight. And you know, that's not to everyone's taste or liking, and I do prefer the lugs on my watches to kind of curve down just a touch, just to make it feel like the watch is actually on the wrist. Now let's take this off and let's see how that bracelet wears. Now, while the bracelet is very comfortable, it's actually a very nice feeling bracelet. You know, there's no edginess underneath, nothing that's catching the hair on my wrist, or not that I'm feeling it on wrist. And The visuals are stunning as well, you know, lots of light play, great use of facets on this bracelet, on the links, and the brushing and the polishing are very clean, you know, clean transition lines between that. But I'm having a similar issue in terms of the fit. You can see how the lugs kind of stand out straight, and also the links do stick out on either end. So I'm not getting the best articulation. It needs to be a bit shorter, as I said, because I'm not getting that wraparound from that bracelet that I'm used to on smaller lug-to-lug watches. But it's okay for bigger wrists, right? That's only my wrist size that's bringing my opinion in there. If you had a wrist size of close to 7 inches and above, I think you'll be more than happy with this. Like I said, the quality of the bracelet really does speak for itself. Now, in terms of summarizing and giving you my final opinion on this watch and on RMALTI, so I'm using all these watches to get a good opinion of them, and so I can tell you for certain, you know, from looking at quite a few models already, you know, the cases are really well made. They've got high quality of finishing. You can just tell that by the brushing, by some of the features, the polishing, you know, the design, the detail is there. They've definitely got that capability. Looking at bracelets, they're not the best, but they are very high level. I'd say very comparable to Seastern. Looking at the MM200 Homage and the, you know, the GMT versions, they're quite good. Now, in terms of dial, you know, they've got a very great dial game. You know, I've seen awesome dials from RMALTI. I've seen awesome hands from RMALTI. But with this particular model, I think on the base one, you know, like I said, it's not anything amazing, anything which makes RMALTI stand out in this particular watch case, because the hands are quite just flat, polished and basic. With the Birch version, there's a bit more going on in terms of the dial, the hour markers, but it's going to be because you've got a textured dial, you know, full of features, and the handset still, you know, polished. You know, nothing in terms of all the great level of brushing and detailing we've seen on the previous models. Now, the problems I have with this is, of course, the bezel. That's the biggest issue I've got. This bezel is not nice to hear. It's a very tinny, hollow, springy sound. It sounds awful, to be honest, and it's not something I like. Now, where does it stand against the Seastern? That is something that I really want to look into now. I really want to compare this versus the Seastern because they've got great points between both. The pricing on both is again quite close. I think the Seastern is just a touch more expensive, but is it just that little bit better as well? And that's something I really want to look at. So I do have a bracelet version 62MAS sitting here from Seastern. So definitely tune in, guys, and I will be working on the comparison very soon. So that's it from me today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.